The thing you gotta understand about the Stillwater Slough ain't the water, or the trees, or even the silence. It's the smell. It's this thick, wet blanket of decay and jasmine that hits you the second you steer your boat past the old cypress knee with the orange spray paint stripe. It smells like something beautiful died a long time ago, and everything since has just been fermenting. Most folks with a lick of sense stay the hell away from it. Their fish finders go haywire. Their lines get snagged on things that feel like bones, and the stories, well, the stories are enough to keep you on the main lake, drinking Bud Light and pretending you don't see that little cut in the shoreline that leads back into the gloom. My name's Jasper, and I guess I never had that lick of sense. It was my granddaddy's stories that did it. He'd sit on the porch, whittling a piece of cypress down to nothing, his voice a low gravel roll like distant thunder. He'd talk about the slough like it was an old friend and a bitter enemy all at once. He said the water there was older than the town, older than the country, that it remembered when different things walked the earth. He said the fish in the Stillwater weren't really fish at all, not anymore. They'd been in that water so long they'd changed, absorbed things. He called them memory fish. "They ain't good eatin', Jasper," he'd say, fixing me with his one good eye. The other clouded over from a fishing hook accident decades back. "You don't catch 'em for the meat. You catch 'em for the truth. They swallow everything that falls in that water. Every secret, every regret, every scream. You hook one, and for a second, you get a taste of it. It's a dangerous business, boy. Some truths ain't meant to be known." I was 17 and stupid, full of cheap whiskey and a need to prove I was half the man he was. So one evening in that bruised, purple hour between dog and wolf, I gassed up the old John boat and pointed its nose toward the slough. The transition was always instant. One minute, you're in the wide-open lake, the sun warming your skin. The next, you're under the slough's canopy. The air gets cold. The light turns the color of wheat green tea. The sound of the outboard becomes a sacrilege. So I killed it and picked up the oars. The drip, drip, drip from the blades. The only noise besides the thumping of my own heart. I wasn't there for catfish or bass. I was there for the others, the memory fish. I rigged up a heavy line with a weighted jig. No bait. Granddaddy said you didn't need bait. They weren't hungry for food. They were hungry for the new, a fresh feeling, a recent sorrow. You just had to put your hook in the water and think real hard about something you wanted to forget. Your own bad memory was the chum. So I thought about Sarah Miller. I thought about her laugh like wind chimes, and the way she'd looked at me in the hallway last week. A look of such pure, unadulterated pity that it felt like a physical blow. "I just think we want different things, Jasper," she'd said. A lie. What she meant was she wanted a future that didn't involve a guy who spent his life in a leaky boat, smelling of fish and failure. I focused all that shame, that raw teenage anguish, and sent it down the line into the black water. I let the jig sink down into the abyss where the light gave up. For an hour, nothing. Just the mosquitoes whining in my ears and the occasional plop of a turtle off a log. The jasmine and rot smell was so thick I could taste it on the back of my tongue. Then my line twitched. Not a bite, a twitch, like something had just brushed against it, curious. I held my breath. Another twitch followed by a slow, deliberate pull. The rod tip bent. This wasn't the frantic fight of a bass. This was something thoughtful. It felt like it was considering the hook. I leaned into it, setting the steel, and the world exploded. The thing on the other end didn't thrash. It surged. It was pure, cold power, a freight train moving through the water. My drag screamed a high-pitched whine of protest. The boat, all 300 pounds of it, started moving sideways, the bow cutting a deep V through the scum-covered water. I braced my feet, my muscles screaming, a feral grin stretching across my face. This was it. This was what Granddaddy talked about. It took me deep into a part of the slough I'd never seen. A cathedral of water and ancient cypress where the trees were so gnarled they looked like they were in agony. Spanish moss hung like tattered burial shrouds. The fight felt less like wrestling a fish and more like arguing with a force of nature. It would stop dead for a minute, then rip off another 50 yards of line. My arms were jelly, my hands raw and bleeding. Finally, after what felt like an hour, the runs got shorter. The surges became heavy, reluctant pulls. I started gaining line, hand over burning hand, the braided cord cutting into my palm. The water beside the boat began to churn, dark and muddy. I leaned over, my heart hammering against my ribs, ready to see my prize. The water cleared for a second. It wasn't a fish. Oh, it was fish-shaped, I suppose. Maybe 6 feet long from snout to tail. But its skin wasn't scales. It was a patchwork of things. Mottled, gray, leprous flesh, stitched together with what looked like thick, black human hair. It had eyes, but they were wrong. Pale, milky, and set too far apart. And they didn't blink. They just stared with a terrible ancient vacancy. And its mouth, a lipless, grotesque slit that ran halfway down its body. And inside, instead of teeth, there were what looked like hundreds of tiny, polished human finger bones, all wriggling slowly independently. I recoiled. A scream caught in my throat. This wasn't a memory fish. This was something else. Something worse. And then the visions hit. Not in my mind. In my senses. 1 second, I was smelling the jasmine and rot of the slough. The next, I was engulfed in the cloying, sweet scent of cheap perfume and the coppery tang of blood. The sound of the swamp vanished, replaced by the frantic, off-key tinkling of a piano and a woman's voice, shrill with terror, begging, "Please, no, don't. I have money." The taste of whiskey, warm and vile, flooded my mouth. I felt a crushing pressure on my own throat, the phantom sensation of my own hands squeezing, the brittle crunch of a trachea giving way. I gagged, dropping the rod. The line went slack. The sensory overload vanished as suddenly as it had come. I was back in the boat, gasping, the real world crashing back in. The smell of the swamp, the drip of the oars, the thumping of my heart. The thing in the water was gone. My line was severed, cleanly, as if by a razor. I scrambled for the oars, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip them. I had to get out. Now. I rowed, not with skill, but with pure blind panic. I didn't care about the direction, only about putting distance between me and that thing. I'd gotten my truth. Granddaddy was right. Some truths are poison. I must have rowed for 20 minutes, my breath sawing in and out of my lungs, before I realized I was lost. The slough had no landmarks, just a million identical trees and a million identical channels. The greenish light was fading, the darkness pooling in the shadows, getting ready to claim the place for its own. I fumbled for the flashlight I kept under the seat, clicking it on. The beam was weak, pathetic against the oppressive gloom. That's when I heard the first whisper. It was so faint I thought it was the wind in the moss. But there was no wind. My locket. It was my mother's! A woman's voice, thin and reedy, laced with a desperate sadness. It seemed to come from the water itself. I froze, the oars poised above the water. "Hello?" I croaked. Silence. Then another one. A man's voice, guttural and thick with rage. "Shouldn't have looked at me like that, the little—" The words were swallowed by the water. My flashlight beam darted across the surface, catching only the reflection of my own terrified face. I started rowing again, faster now. The whispers began to multiply, layering over one another. A chorus of the damned rising from the depths. "I didn't mean to drop him." The money's buried under the—" "It hurts, oh God, it hurts so much." "I tell my wife I'm—" A cacophony of final moments, of secrets taken to the grave, all bubbling up from the black water. I put my hands over my ears, but it was no use. The voices weren't in the air. They were inside my head, a psychic plague. My boat bumped into something solid. I shrieked, a high, unmanly sound, and swung the flashlight around. I'd run aground on a small, muddy island, no bigger than a pickup truck. In the center of it, half sunk in the muck, was an old, rusted-out icebox. And sitting on top of the icebox, clean and dry as if it had just been placed there, was a single polished oak box. A tackle box! My blood ran cold. I knew that box. It was my granddaddy's, the one he'd had since before I was born, the one he'd claimed he lost on the main lake years ago. A new voice cut through the whispers, a voice I knew, gravelly, familiar, and dripping with a sadness so profound it felt like a physical weight. "I'm so sorry, Jasper." It was Granddaddy's voice. The whispers fell silent, as if in deference. "Granddaddy?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The vision didn't come in a rush this time. It unfolded slowly, horribly, like a poisonous flower. I saw him, not as the old man on the porch, but younger my age. His face unlined, but his eyes already old. He was in this very slough in a different boat, with a man I recognized from an old photo on our mantel, his best friend, Billy Crow. They were arguing, their faces twisted in anger over a girl. Over money, over some stupid, youthful grievance that suddenly mattered more than life itself. I saw Granddaddy's face contort with rage. I saw him lunge. I saw the oar in his hands. I saw it connect with Billy's head with a wet, sickening crack. I saw the shock on both their faces, Billy's as the life left his eyes, my Granddaddy's as he realized what he'd done. I felt his panic, his gut-wrenching terror. I felt the cold, slimy weight of Billy's body as he rolled it over the side of the boat. I watched it sink into the black water of the Stillwater Slough, the water that remembers everything. The vision shifted. I saw my Granddaddy years later, an old man haunted by a ghost that wasn't a ghost. He'd come back here again and again, trying to hook the memory fish, not for the truth, but for an escape. He was trying to catch the piece of the water that held his friend, his sin, his terrible secret. He thought if he could just reel it in, he could finally be free of it. But the slough doesn't give up its secrets. It only collects them, and it had collected him. His crime, his fear, his lifelong regret, it had festered down there in the dark. It had grown, mutated, fed on the other sorrows in the water. It had become the thing I had hooked, the thing that was now hunting me. The vision ended. I was back on the island, sobbing, vomiting into the mud. The tackle box sat there, a silent accusation. The whispers started again, but they were different now. They were coalescing, merging into a single, slithering thought that wormed its way directly into my brain. You know. So you stay. You become part of the collection, new, fresh. The water around the little island began to churn. Not in one place, but everywhere. All around me. Dozens of wakes, hundreds, cutting through the water, moving toward me with a dreadful, unified purpose. I could see them just below the surface. The pale, patchwork flesh, the staring, milky eyes, the lipless mouths with their wriggling, bony teeth. They were the swallowed. Every sin, every accident, every murder and misery that had ever been sunk into this cursed water. And my Granddaddy's sin was their king. I scrambled backward, but there was nowhere to go. The island was too small. The water was alive with them. The largest one, his one, surfaced directly in front of me. It didn't breach. It just rose, the water sluicing off its horrible form, until its head was level with mine. Those vacant eyes held me. That lipless mouth didn't open. But the voice filled my skull, a chorus of every whisper now speaking as one. We are lonely. We are hungry. You will be a new memory. A good one. I felt a cold, psychic pull. It wasn't trying to bite me. It was trying to absorb me, to pull my consciousness, my very soul, out of my body and into the cold, collective memory of the slough. I felt a dizzying, nauseating sensation of being unmade. My thoughts began to fray at the edges. Memories. Sarah's face, my mother's voice, the feel of the sun on the main lake, slipping away like sand through my fingers. I was screaming, but no sound came out. The world was turning gray, fading to static. My hand, flailing wildly in my panic, slapped against the cold, hard metal of the old icebox. My fingers closed around something lodged in the rust, a piece of metal, long, thin, and sharp. An old file, maybe, left here by a trapper or another poor soul who'd met his end in this place. The last shred of my survival instinct kicked in. This thing, this collective, it fed on memory, on emotion, on passivity. It consumed regret and fear. What would it do with something else? As the gray static closed in, as I felt my very self beginning to dissolve into the chorus of whispers, I didn't think of Sarah, or my Granddaddy, or my own regrets. I didn't offer it fear. I focused every ounce of my being, every shred of my disintegrating consciousness, on a single pure white-hot emotion. Not terror, not sorrow, rage. A raw, primal, and utterly defiant fury. Fury at the slough, at the thing my Granddaddy had created, at the unfairness of it all. I grabbed that mental fury, bundled it with all my strength, and in my mind I didn't push it away. I shoved it. I speared that raw, aggressive hatred right down the psychic connection the thing had opened into my mind. The effect was instantaneous and violent. The chorus of voices shattered into a scream of 1,000 agonies. The large creature recoiled as if struck by a physical blow, its body contorting in a way that was utterly unnatural, even for it. The milky eyes didn't just stare, they winced. I had given it something it couldn't digest, a memory of pure, unfiltered aggression. It was poison to them. The psychic pull snapped. I fell back onto the mud, gasping, my own mind slamming back into my body with the force of a truck crash. I was whole again. I was me. The creatures in the water were thrashing now, not with purpose, but in confusion and pain. The connection was broken. The largest one sank beneath the surface, its pale form fading into the blackness, but not before I saw it. Change. A patch of its flesh, right where its head would be, had turned an angry, livid red like a burn. I had scarred it. I had marked the memory. I didn't wait. I scrambled into the boat, my body screaming in protest. I grabbed the oars and I rowed. I didn't look back. I rowed until my muscles burned and my vision spotted, guided by some desperate, primal instinct that knew the way out even if my mind didn't. When I finally burst out of the Stillwater Slough and back into the open lake, the dawn was just breaking, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. The air smelled clean, of water and pine. I collapsed in the bottom of the boat, sobbing with relief. I never went back. I sold the John boat. I don't even fish off the pier anymore. But the slough isn't done with me. Sometimes when I'm taking a shower, for just a split second, the water will taste like whiskey and blood. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I'll wake up to the faint, off-key sound of a piano. And sometimes, when the moon is right and the wind is still, I can feel it. A faint, cold, psychic pull from the east, from where the slough sleeps. It's not trying to consume me anymore. It's not hungry. It's curious. I showed it something new, something it had never tasted before. And a thing that collects memories, a thing that's been around since before men, gets bored with the old ones. It wants to taste that rage again. It wants to understand it. It's learning. And I know deep in my bones, with a certainty that keeps me awake night after night, that the next time I hear that whisper in the dark, it won't be a plea or a regret. It's gonna be angry.